Why is Israel losing the PR battle, and what would it take for us to actually win it? I want to take you inside a very special event that happened just a couple nights ago, the launch of my book, When the Stones Speak, at the National Library, which I did together with Ambassador Mike Huckabee, the United States Ambassador to Israel, and Alon Levy, one of Israel's top media personalities. We didn't talk about press releases. We did not go into talking points. Rather, we talked about what Israel is missing internally before we even open our mouths to the world. Here's the actual truth. For decades, we've been playing the wrong game. It's like showing up to a baseball field holding a football, and we wonder why we can't score. This is not about explaining ourselves better, contrary to what many people think. It's about standing up for who we are, about speaking openly about our roots, about God without embarrassment, about covenant without hesitation, and about our indigenous bond to this land without flinching. Until we make that internal shift, nothing we say externally is going to land on the ears and hearts of the people in the world. What does it look like when Israel stops apologizing? When we speak from identity instead of defending ourselves? When we stop asking the world for permission to exist? That's what you're about to hear. Let's begin. I want to begin by sharing with you a quick clip by Ambassador Huckabee, where he explains how we've been missing the communications game altogether. Let's hear what he has to say.
People don't remember facts and figures and graphs and charts. I'll tell you what they remember. They remember stories. The Jewish people have the greatest story in the world, so tell it. It's a wonderful story to be told, and you have the receipts. You have the Bible. And for heaven's sakes, I would say, use it and tell it with courage and boldness. Never speak it with apology.
That's exactly the point. We show up with data. We have spokespeople, myself included, that stand in front of the camera and explain how the bullet fired in Gaza was aimed for a terrorist exactly behind a wall away from civilians. And these messages are true. Or how we move the Gazan civilians out of the way so we can kill Hamas, or how we use as much intelligence as possible to try or kill our enemies. These are all great messages. However, they fall flat on their face when the other side, Israel's enemies, make a false claim. And what is that claim? You stole our land. If we cannot go to the heart of that claim, of going back to our deepest roots in terms of communicating, we are going to miss the communications war. Yes, this war is being fed on TikTok. Yes, this war is being led by algorithms and by bots and everything else in social media. But what's in our control is how we speak. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next point that I'm bringing to you now.
We have to talk about defending our ancestral land. We have to call it our ancestral land. Wouldn't anyone defend their ancestral land? Again and again and again, because our enemies, those who face us, who've tried to destroy our narrative, it didn't begin yesterday. We fell asleep at the wheel. They've been doing this for 80 years. They've been telling the story. Much of it is not based on fact. There's a grain of fact. Most of it's not based on fact. And it has become, in the world, accepted fact. We have got to begin the fight to talk about our truth and not be afraid.
Israel, we often like to declare happily, because it's true, that we are the startup nation, that we have more startup companies on the NASDAQ and on the NYSE than any other country per capita in the world, and in fact, almost compared to many other countries, period, even though Israel has a population of 10 million people. These are all true. We've developed the cherry tomato. You couldn't turn on your cell phone without Israel. We have an excellent defense system and military that carries out goals that protect the entire Western world. However, we've been asleep at the wheel. While we have been speaking about technology, about our comparative advantages in the world, our enemies have been creating a narrative. It didn't begin yesterday on TikTok. This goes back to the very founding of the quote-unquote Palestinian identity, which began in the early 1920s by Haj Amin al-Husseini, who was the original leader of this movement to try to create a national history around the people who were in this land during and before the Independence War and also following the First World War. Haj Amin al-Husseini began to construct a Palestinian identity. Up until that time, this land was called Palestine. It had been called Palestine for 2,000 years because Hadrian, the Roman emperor, around the year 134, that goes back 2,000 years, had just defeated the last Jews in what was called the Bar Kokhba revolt. However, Hadrian knew you can defeat the Jews, but they'll keep coming back again and again and again to their land to fight. What's the name of the land at that time before Hadrian? It was called Judea. So Hadrian did something by changing the land of Judea and calling it by a new word, a word in fact of a nation that had been extinct for more than 7 centuries, who are called the Philistines. And he erased the name Judea and put in the name Palestine. First of all, so Jews would not have a land that bears their own name. And secondly, to resurrect the ancient biblical enemy of the Jewish people that we had already fought. From that point in time, 134 CE, until the present day, there has never, ever been an independent government of Palestine. However, in the 1920s, Haj Amin decided to construct a Palestinian identity. Palestinian Arabs, or the Arabs that are living in biblical Israel, have spent 80 years constructing an entire myth, an identity that goes back, according to them, hundreds of years or thousands of years. Now, there is no doubt that there were Arabs in this land. There were plenty of Arabs. They were mostly migrating from Saudi Arabia. Why is it called Saudi Arabia? Because that is where the cornerstone of the Arabic peoples began. They were migrating people, and there were no question there were people migrating here. However, they didn't call themselves Palestinians. You'll find no record whatsoever of a Palestinian people, of a Palestinian parliament, of any decisions being made for Palestine, because there was no government. The people living here called themselves Southern Syrians. They felt that they were part of the larger Syrian empire that extended down into what is today modern-day Israel. At times, they considered themselves Turks, Ottomans, when the time was that Turkey took over this area. However, when the Zionists and Israelis joined Israelis and Jews who were always here, there was an unbroken tradition of Jews who were always in the land of Israel, and came with this incredible national identity, the Palestinians began working on constructing a very, very careful narrative that says that religiously, Muhammad was the very first person ever here, that they are the original indigenous people to the land, and that the Jews of today have no connection to the land. Again, they've said, and I've spoken about this many times, you have Ikrim Sabri from the Temple Mount who said time and time again, he's the chief mufti of Jerusalem, and his message goes out to all the Palestinian Arabs and Arabs around the world. Not a single stone bears a Jewish marking in all of Jerusalem. It is the art of the Jews to deceive the world. Entire generation has grown up believing that these Jewish people, that we are not indigenous. And we have been speaking about cherry tomatoes and cell phones. That is what it means to show up to the game with a football when it's a baseball game. What I want us now is to hear an incredible insight by Ambassador Huckabee about how you take the truth of a story and you begin to tell it. Let's go underground to the Pilgrimage Road.
If we're talking about the pilgrim pathway, we're talking about a place that people walked 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, up to the Temple Mount, and it's now been uncovered, but it uncovered something that has always been there. So it's not like they built an amusement park so everybody could come and see, oh, this is what it would have been like. No, this isn't what it would have been like. This is what it is then, now, and forever. And that is the irrefutable, indisputable validation of this being the Jewish homeland.
This is why the city of David shakes our enemies. You can argue about politics, but you cannot argue about the actual factual proof beneath the ground. That is why there was such an incredible attempt to destroy the excavations in the city of David, both to light fires, physically destroy them, and vandalize them, to stop the excavations at the site, and even to try to force the Arab workers at the site to quit. There were even hits on the head of the city of David, David al-Be'eri. Terrorists had tried to take his life. Why? Because he had the vision to grow the city of David. Sites like the Pilgrimage Road, when you walk on those stones, you have never been to Israel before, you come for the first time, and you begin at a pool at the bottom and you walk on the original stones. And along the way off to the side And this is what's there, and it's going to be open to the public in a couple weeks. I also speak about it in When the Stones Speak, my book. When you stop on the side and you see the small coins with Jewish writing that were minted on that road, that say for the freedom of Zion, marked and minted during our fight with the Romans. And this was minted before Christianity. This was minted 600 years before Islam. Then we're not speaking politics anymore. We're speaking fact. And what is the message that comes out? The Jewish people are indigenous to this land. We didn't steal this land. This has always been our land. We were exiled by the Romans and a remnant remained here. For 2,000 years, we tried coming back. Until in the 19th century, Jews began coming back in large numbers into the land. They bought the land, they came with permission, and they came legally back to a land that has been our ancient and historic land. These are the points that we need to be making, our ancestral history, every single time that a Jew stands up. And I want us to, when we listen to Ambassador Huckabee, what we hear is somebody that with unadulterated, pure belief and understanding tells us we have a story. Tell our story. We can spend millions of dollars, and they are being spent, trying to do studies and trying to understand how to reach the young generation of Americans, young generations of people throughout the world, to teach them that Israel's a democracy, and it is. How we have an incredibly moral army, and we do. How we are a light into the world with regards to technology, and it's true. But unless we go down into the indigenous roots, unless we explain that we have a true ancestral inheritance to this land, we will always be defeated by the lies of our enemies that we stole this land. That is what I'm going to be addressing in the next point. Please listen in.
So Leslie Stahl came, and she said before the interview, she said, you know, would you give a tour to my husband and I? We only have about 45 minutes, but I've never brought my husband on a film shoot. He asked to come to this one. So I take her and her husband through the city of David. We do the overlook. And then we go into King David's palace, and I had the seals brought to show her. Her husband was crying. Leslie was beside herself. And then the cameras began rolling for the interview. And it was like wind came and dried the tears off her face. Sand like pulled any emotion away. And in that entire interview, there was nothing about the Jewish people being indigenous, about the seals, about anything. You know why she can't acknowledge what she sees? Because she is absolutely committed to the division of Jerusalem. What's she going to say to her viewers? That the city of David is in East Jerusalem that's going to be given away?
So this is it. This is the battle. We speak the truth. I spoke to Leslie Stahl about those seals that were found in the city of David. But politics gets involved, and you, the viewer, or you, the listener, never saw it and never heard it because they control the editing rooms. Now, this is before the dawn, really, the major dawn of social media. Today, Israel has the ability to begin getting out these messages without going via big media. And big media is even making major changes. As we know, Barry Weiss, who has now become a network head, which is an incredible thing, I think, to bring truth to the American people and people throughout the world. The media can try to stop us, but our goal is to find every opening where we are and begin pushing out that ancestral message. Now, what does it mean to be ancestral to the land of Israel? Would any of us doubt that the people in Saudi Arabia, the descendants of Muhammad, have an ancestral indigenous connection to Mecca and Medina? Everyone's talking about Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords. And even in the Abraham Accords, there's a clause that connects us to the Abrahamic nations based on a shared line of ancestry. The simple question is, and this is what was posed to Ambassador Huckabee, should the Arab nations that are part of the Abraham Accords understand that we are also the indigenous people to the land of Israel? And what will happen if they don't?
And I wonder whether you think that it's time now for the Abraham Accords countries to explicitly recognize and acknowledge that the Jewish people are native to the land of Israel.
It would be a big improvement in bringing a better understanding of reality and peace to the world. I think it's important that we understand that the Bible itself is the most important book to give validity to the idea that the Jewish people are indigenous to the land. It really started with the title deed. You might say the Bible is a great legal document. It is a contract. It is really a title deed. If you go to Genesis 12, where God explicitly says to Abraham, this is the land that I'm giving you. I'm making with you a covenant. And that covenant is unbreakable. God will never break that covenant. And that's why people ask me sometimes, look, you're not even Jewish, you're Christian. Why is it you believe in the land of Israel and the Jewish people? I said, because I believe the Bible. And if the Bible says God made a covenant with the Jewish people, that is an unbreakable covenant.
I think that this is going to be the real test of the Abraham Accord era. Today, there's an opportunity. There's a defense opportunity. We see nations such as Iran closing in on the Middle East, threatening not only Israel, but also our fellow countries around us, like the Emirates, like Saudi Arabia, like Bahrain and Morocco, possibly in the future, Qatar, although we're far from that for now, threatening major nations around the world. You've got Turkey to the north, which is another arm of Iran. And you've got China in the Far East, which buys their oil from Iran and shares weaponry, along with North Korea. These pressures are bringing together countries under the umbrella of the United States to form an alliance, and that's a very, very important thing. But what's going to happen when those cards shift, when the chips fall a little bit differently? We don't know how the world's going to change, but when that opportunity changes, when the insistence that we bond together because of defense changes, what's going to be the test if the Abraham Accords really last? It's not going to be based on convenience. It's going to be based on a shared history. And in fact, if we are able to stand up and go to Abraham Accord meetings and say, we are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob gave us this land. And here is the book, the Bible, that shows it, which the Christian Bible is based on and which the Quran draws from. Can you imagine the people around the table who hold their own religion sacred? What are they going to say? But when Israelis travel and go to the Abraham Accords country, don't eat kosher food, don't pray, don't respect their beliefs, what do our fellow Abraham Accord countries think of us? Are we just the white arm of colonialism that have thrown our roots off to the side? Do we ignore our spiritual connection to the land? At the end of the day, the Jewish people are in Israel because of our spiritual, ancestral connection to the land. That is what we need to say. And then a message came from the crowd about what is American Jewry facing and how can they play a role in what's happening. Let's hear my answer and then let's have a talk about it.
But I think there's a crossroads for American Jewry. You know, there's real fear. This is a transformational moment for them. You can either stick your head deeper and deeper in the earth, try to hide, try to blend in, try to tuck that Jewish star. I'll never forget, there was a Jewish family that came here after October 7th, and they said to me, we're still wearing our Jewish stars, but tucked inside. And I felt for them, because they feel like they're battling because they've got a Jewish star on it all. But this is the time, take out that Jewish star, take out your Bible, go to every protest and stand strong. Standing strong for Israel, standing strong for Judaism, holding your head up high is what's going to preserve that community for the future.
History is watching. It's not the time to shrink, it's a time to stand tall. It's a time to stand with Israel and our story. It's time to make a major shift. The evening with Ambassador Huckabee and Elon Levy at the National Library was truly incredible, because what you felt in the air and what the audience felt in the air was a higher level truth than what we're speaking. It's a truth that speaks on the level of covenant, of ancient covenant, and people are searching for meaning. At the end of the event, a woman came up to me and asked me a great question personally. She said, what about people that don't believe? Well, I said, first of all, let's separate this message into two items. There's a message of God and the covenant, and then there's the message of our ancestral indigenous history in the land of Israel. Both of those are critical, and both of those may need to stretch the audience. But if we keep aiming low, aiming for the audience is right now and trying to feed them the same jargon that they're being fed by us, a people of 10 million, surrounded by an entire world Jewry of 14 million. Supporters, Christian supporters, the average supporters around the world, we are facing a media onslaught of billions of people. We're not going to win in terms of numbers. We're not going to win because we're feeding young TikTokers, Instagrammers, Facebookers the exact same message again and again and again. Yes, we created the cell phone, but we are going to answer that message by elevating our message and turning into something that is, in fact, a feeling, a dream inside these people. Stretch a little bit, reach back into your history, reach back into the concept of, do you believe that there's a covenant and a faith? Because for every one of you, there's one place that you can go freely in the world. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, everyone's invited. There's no demagoguery. There's no exclusion. There's one place that you're invited to visit. In the same way that Israel 3,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago had visitors of different religions from around the world, Israel today is protecting the holy sites in order to create a vessel that anyone around the world that's exploring their roots, exploring their indigenous roots or their spiritual roots, can come and find a home. Ultimately speaking, that is what cuts through the politics. That's what cuts through the jargon. We hear Ambassador Huckabee and my dear friend Zev Ornstein, who has a fantastic connection with Ambassador Huckabee, said something so brilliant to me after we both heard him speak at the City of David. Zev said to me, you know, one day we're going to learn to speak like him. At the end of this event, as he walked off the stage, I thought to myself, you know, it's fascinating. The Jewish people have had incredible advisors throughout history. We had Melchizedek, the non-Jewish king that Abraham meets in the book of Genesis. And what does Melchizedek said? He was the first person to use the words Baruch Hashem, blessed is God. It wasn't a Jew who said those first words. It was a non-Jewish king who had the open faith to say those words. And who was the next non-Jew? Jethro, Yitro, who came and saw the Jewish people where we were, saw people waiting in line to ask Moses, our teacher, questions, and people almost fainting from thirst because there were so many people going just to Moses. And it took someone from the outside the Jewish people to say, Moses, you have to create a fleet of teachers and judges so that these people don't have to wait in line for you. And that began the process of Moses being our great teacher who taught the teachers we have today. In the same way I look at Ambassador Huckabee, the United States ambassador to the state of Israel, truly is someone we can look up to, who knows the simple truth that the covenant says that the Jewish people are here because we were promised by God. And we have the history buried inside the ground where we let the stones speak and tell us that story. And all we have to do is listen to that story and have the courage to stand up to the world and say it. And that's how possibly, if there's enough people out there listening, we'll win. And in either case, we've won because we know that we are speaking the truth.